Welcome to Strength in Leos.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Strength in Leos podcast. Super pumped to bring you guys just another cool episode, another awesome episode of the podcast. It's been a while since we had our last roundtable episode. I know you guys love these. I know it's super popular on the channel, and why not bring one of the most popular people in the leopard gecko hobby in the game right now for another awesome roundtable. This is the second time they've both been on the roundtable. And without further ado, let's just introduce Seth and Heidi. So, guys, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Evan.
What's up, Evan? Thanks for having us on, man.
How's it going? It's been a while.
Going good. I don't know about the whole most popular in the hobby, though. I don't know where you're pulling that shit out.
Numbers don't lie.
It is a popular video, I think. I think we've done 2 roundtables, but one was the YouTube video, and the other one was just on Spotify, I believe.
I think you're
right.
But
yeah, we're getting them in there, putting them in the books. It's like the old Gecko Nation radio podcast where they had all the roundtables that they did in there. So we got to get our numbers up to try to come close to those.
That's where all the knowledge is at, man. That's where I always send people
right.
those roundtable episodes on Gecko Nation radio. Well, before we had this podcast, now I just send them.
Right.
Now I write them both down and say, here's all the facts. Just go and learn.
Yeah. I don't know why you guys keep coming on. You guys, it's like, what are we doing on here? But I'm like, whenever they're always down to come on the podcast. So whenever they're down, I'm just super happy to have them on here.
For sure.
Nice. So in terms of leopard geckos and breeding, just any updates that anybody has from the last episode in terms of any big changes, any new additions to their collections, anything that anybody wants to get out there?
Heidi's got all kind of crazy shit going on over there.
Well, yeah. So I did get some new additions. Nothing will be breeding for probably like 24, but I got into some fuscus and hardwicky. So I have little groups of those that I'm excited about, and a newer addition fat tail earlier this year. So be working more with that stuff, but otherwise, yeah, the old Tremper stuff, Skittle stuff, it's all looking really awesome this year. My Tremper Firebolts are
that reverse stripe that you're gonna send to me. Let's talk about that. That freaking toy, Heidi. Whenever you did that Halloween photo shoot and it was up on the roof, that one in particular looks like a toy. It's such weird pastel colors, like with that dark bold. It's crazy looking. I can't wait to see it in person. Whenever I open the box, and you send it to me later in the year, I can't wait to see it in person.
Yeah, I'm hoping to replicate that and see what he does next year. So we'll see.
Well, yeah, I'll show you what he does, after I have him.
I live closer. I could just drive over to Heidi's place and just sneak in the basement and
do it, Evan.
Go get it.
I mean,
that's a male, Heidi? That's a male?
Yeah, it's a boy. His name is...
Nice. Seth, what you have? Any new updates from last time?
Leos, I've got some really cool rainwater stuff cooking that I haven't really shown off at all. That'll be coming up next year. Honestly, other than that, on the Leo end, I'm seriously considering pulling way back on my Leo production next year.
More than before?
Well, right now, like this year, I produced just barely more than I produced last year, like almost the same exact amount as what I produced last year, about over 100 animals. And I was planning on doing the same next year, but my fat tail production is pretty much tripling for next season. I'm going from about 100 animals a year on fat tails to I'm projecting at least 300 animals next year. So, and that's going to be all different projects, all different genetics. So I'm really feeling like it's my best interest and my collection's best interest to kind of maybe not get rid of all my Leos, but just kind of hold off on producing any Leos next year or much Leos. I might make a few pairings, but it'll just be a select few bold pairings and a select few, my tangerine bill albinos. I never talk enough about them or show them off enough. They're kind of, right where I want them at this point. But like I said, I don't want to get rid of it all, but I'm really thinking seriously about holding off on production on most of it just to focus on my fat tail projects, because I feel like that's the niche that I need to fill right now. And frankly, I'm kind of tired of, they're getting frustrated with some of the, leopard gecko market, at the shows and stuff, just dealing with really, oversaturation and super low prices. And it's just, it's hard to compete with. So on a business level and on a business sense, I feel like fat tails is the direction that I really need to take. And that's where I'm more passionate at this point too. I'm more excited about most of my fat tail projects than I am the majority of my Leo pairings, in total truth.
Yeah, no, it's super crazy that, like, I think in the Leo community, you obviously have a ton of awesome projects. You're running Yellow Bell stuff's looking insane. Everybody knows you for your bold stripes, but when you post like some of your Oreo project stuff or your AML stuff, it's crazy how like some of those posts are even getting a little bit more attention from people than some of your Leo stuff.
Yeah, it's just kind of a natural evolution of things. I think it's what, again, whatever you're most passionate about is what you end up posting most about. And whenever I go through my Instagram feed, it's 75% fat tails, which is exactly what my collection consists of, is 75% fat tails. So it makes sense that I've gone in that direction naturally, and now I'm kind of just, I guess, realizing it like full on, like, okay, this is really the direction I need to go and the route I need to take at this point in my, quote unquote career. So we'll see where it goes. We'll see where it takes me. My main thing is, me, I'm always preaching about not overproducing and, staying small, starting slow, growing, slowly. And that's my main thing, is I don't want to go, I've been producing about 250 geckos a year between both species over the last couple seasons, and that's been going well for me. I have it spread out pretty well throughout the year, and I don't want to double that overnight, in one season. So that's my main focus there, is if I pull back on the Leos, then I won't be doubling that. I'll just be increasing that by about 25% or so, so we shall see.
Nice. Heidi, how do you feel about that?
I think it's a very admirable approach, because I've been saying that too. I had a bunch of females this year I didn't breed because I don't want to produce just to produce. I want whatever I put them through to have a purpose. So, and I don't want to become overwhelmed or have all these animals that I'm getting rid of really cheaply or something just to get them moved out. So I think that since he wants to focus more on the fat tails, like, there's no reason to breed all the Leos that he has. Give them a break for a season or two, and then it also helps to really narrow down which specific projects then you're more passionate about. Like, I don't typically have a lot of real normal type stuff hatching out anymore. Everything is really specific now. Like, occasionally I'll get a couple banded looking geckos, but otherwise everything is striped or jungly or reverse striped now, and that's where I want to be.
Right. Yeah, and it's super cool that even a lot of people that are getting into the hobby, whether they have, really mature collections they've been breeding for a couple years, or even if they're starting out, it's really cool to see how even you guys are still changing your approaches as time goes on, and you're going back to the drawing board and saying like, hey, like, I really thought this was cool when I was getting started, but like, let's move on in more AFTs and let's see how like I become more passionate about these, or this bold stripe project. Let's see how we could create this and add into snows and do other stuff. So it's really cool to see even you guys at this point in your breeding careers that you guys are still seeing what you guys like, and still pivoting to see what lane you guys want to really fill in the hobby.
Yeah, it's definitely been like a game changer. Like, at this point, seeing when I go to an expo and looking at down at my table, I can't believe some of the geckos I'm letting go that a few years ago I never would have. Like, and then I think back of what I have at home, and I'm like, I'm actually getting somewhere that like I have been proud of the entire time. I mean, you'll get, every once in a while you still hatch something that's like, I know I'll sell you, but I'm not one of those that I'm going to post it like, oh, it just hatched, it'll be for sale in 8 weeks. I still want to watch it develop, because you'd never know.
Right.
Those ugly ducklings that look like crap for a little while, and then at about 30 grams, awesome.
It happens. So I tell
yeah.
Hey, like, people sell them like they always look the best between 3 to 6 months, and then sometimes they don't look as vibrant anymore. And sometimes right past that peak is where they're like, oh, I should not have gotten rid of that, or I'm glad I didn't get rid of that. You go to pull out the tub, and it's like, holy cow, where did you come from?
Yeah, totally.
So
Yeah.
that'll be even seeing it a few days later after a new shed or something. Like, it's crazy what these geckos do with a little bit more time.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point that we're all getting to. Like I think in the gecko hobby, we've like gone for that, like, let's get that awesome gecko at 25, 30 grams before, and let's get it out the door before it falls off. But like the point of this is to get geckos that get better with age. And that's what I'm seeing in both of you guys' collection. And I think everybody should pretty much strive for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when it comes to, I kind of brought you guys for this podcast, and I wanted to talk a lot about kind of the education in leopard geckos. I know that's something that you guys are both super passionate about. Like, you guys are on the podcast a lot of times talking about this stuff, but especially how social media impacts that education, getting education out there. I know you guys are both active in Facebook groups. Heidi, you're the queen of the Facebook groups, trying to get everybody in line and trying to teach the, and just educate people. How do you feel like that's been going, and how has that impact been on the hobby recently?
I'll go first. I actually have a brainstorm that I just came up with. I haven't even told you about it yet, Heidi. I figured out what I'm going to do with my TikTok account. Because the fact that it's like I can't just post the same stuff that I do, like Facebook and Instagram. I can post the same thing on both platforms, and it's getting out to both masses. TikTok's different, right? So what I've thought about doing is making TikTok basically a library that I can send people to of short instructional videos of different topics, be it setting up, an undertake heater and probe, and thermostat probe, or gut loading, or incubation, or like all the different little things that we would talk about here on a 3-hour roundtable episode, going through all different care aspects and things like that. Anything that comes up when a customer sends me a message and I have to go through it, I'm going to try to start adding that to the list of things I want to make a video about, a little short 5-minute video or whatever, however much time it takes, to have. I want my TikTok to basically just consist of that. No showing, or maybe just very minimal, like showing off geckos, but mostly just educational stuff on each video, to where people can scroll through my TikTok and have all these different topics to look at. What do y'all think about that?
I think that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's all like any resource is. You want to get it out there and then just send it to people mass, so you don't have to continue to type out that same 3-paragraph approach for each one. That's a great idea.
I've just really been having trouble finding
the cute videos, and they want a gecko, but they don't actually, like there's a bunch of TikToks and it's just a cute gecko doing whatever with some music in the background. There really isn't much for care. And when you go onto YouTube, it depends on what you click on.
Exactly. And I've had a hard time figuring out a direction to do, on that platform. And that's just kind of a brainstorm I came up with in the last week or so that I thought might work. And so I'm going to go with that and, see how it goes.
Yeah. So, I don't think anybody's making that content either on TikTok.
You want to follow my educational videos? Check out TikTok. Check out my TikTok channel. It'll be
popular. People are way more visual these days. They don't want to sit and read stuff.
Yeah.
So that's why we had talked, a month or so ago about maybe doing like weekly or bi-weekly like Instagram lives, so we can answer questions and then put that out there. But I haven't had the time, really, neither of you. But
it's so hard for us to come to coordinate, and this would be a better library format of having everything, and you could label each one with the topic of whatever it's going over, and I just feel like it'd be a better format to have it stashed away.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I'm for it. I'm all for it.
Yeah, having that option is great, because a lot of people, like, they'll say, check Facebook, or they typically have the same 2 sources, websites to go check out, or they'll just say YouTube, and they don't really specify who to look for. And if they do, it's usually not the most reputable source to be getting your information from.
Right.
But like I said, people would rather just watch a video and look at pictures over reading anything.
Yeah. And I think even with people going to those sources, like you were talking about, Heidi, they're like, oh, just look it up on YouTube. But that person who might have the most views on YouTube doesn't always equate to the most reputable person to be getting that information from, which I think is another big thing that's kind of popping up now. Is just because that person has a couple thousand subscribers doesn't mean what they're saying is ethical and is the best thing for the gecko.
Mm-hmm. And having a lot of views isn't necessarily a good thing either. It could be people watching it over and over again, be like, because they heard something negative about the video, and they're like, wait, what? And every time you start it over or click back on it, that's a whole nother view for them.
Yeah, which has been super problematic, I think, for the hobby now. It's becoming more like sensational and going towards the drama and the negativity. And when that happens, there's just such a big vacuum of focusing on that when there's a whole other side of, okay, but how are we still teaching these people how to take care of their geckos? People still are like, oh, what should I do in terms of housing? Like, people still don't know how the basics of just care. So how are we going to go on to deal with this drama if people still don't even know how to take care of a leopard gecko?
I'm saying it over and over again daily on the groups and through personal messenger and at expos. And so Seth's idea is really good because there's obviously a top 10 plus typical things people are asking my gecko won't eat, the heating, shedding, just things like that. You can get that covered, within just a few minutes even, because then otherwise too, people get bored. They're like, okay.
And I feel like I can just get so much more laid out, so much more information put down in a shorter time frame on a video than I can typing it all out. And again, people would rather watch than read, for whatever reason. So that's kind of the
especially if you've seen my type of comments in groups, it's usually a couple paragraphs long.
Exactly.
As thorough as possible because they have a question. And a lot of the times you'll just get, Google it or YouTube it. And I always am like, no, like they asked here, let's help here. Like, what's the point of the group if we're going to just send them somewhere else? Or
right.
If they're recommending other groups, it's like, no, we have all the information here. Give it to them or maybe don't comment. And if I find it out before I say anything, because I'm like, I don't be like, I don't know. Like, I don't understand that comment at all. Like,
yeah, no, and even when you think about where the hobby's moving, not even just in leopard geckos, but you see so many like reptile YouTubers when it comes to education and how those industries are really booming. It's all based on like video. No one is writing blog posts too much anymore. No one else is in the forum days where people are just typing paragraphs and reading through those. It's really just, how could I get this information as quickly as possible, and how quickly as possible, and how easy it is to access it. And that's not happening through text anymore. Just people aren't reading it, and through that, people are going through their own assumptions, or going to people who are giving them that information quickly, but it's not necessarily the right information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest problems now. Even in Facebook groups, they're like, okay, well, just tell me the answer. And sometimes you can't answer it in a 1 or 2 sentence answer format.
Or they just don't like it. And even at an expo, like they will come over and they'll be like, well, the person over at that table said something totally different. And I'm like, I mean, some of it is, it's not that it's like contradicting necessarily. There are multiple ways to do things, which I say consistently. But there are some things that it's like, well, they're still following something, that they misheard or were misled. And they're just, repeating that over and over and over again. And, care and what we know evolves every day. And which is another one of the biggest things in the group is every time someone mentions heat pad, they're like, oh, that's outdated. Like, yes, there are more efficient ways to probably heat your geckos, but it's still a very acceptable method that works with a thermostat that, if you want to use lighting and go bio, that's totally fine. But you can't sit there and tell people what they're doing is wrong if it does work, just because, that's your opinion. And we get that every day, is like someone will say something about heating and they'll be like, well, heat mats are outdated. It's like, okay, like they still make them. They do still work. I mean, I guess the same goes for like basking bulbs. They make basking bulbs, but they're not for leopard geckos. So I just try to tell people, like, there's all different ways you can do it. It depends on your setup and your gecko. And then obviously what you're comfortable with using.
I honestly prefer and recommend under tank heaters and tell people it's the more user friendly way, because if you set up any given enclosure with a heat lamp in the summertime in South Texas, and the house is 75 during the day in the room temp, and then that same tank with the same wattage bulb comes into fall and winter, and now the house daytime temp is 65 or so. Well, now that tank is going to be 10 degrees cooler because it's got the same wattage bulb. So you have to constantly check and adjust if you're doing overhead lighting, rather than an under tank heater on a thermostat is going to adjust with that room throughout the seasons. And you're going to have a more consistent, user-friendly, method there, is the way I explain it to people personally at the shows and stuff. Because I'd rather send them home with an under tank heater on a thermostat. That's what I sell in my starter kits. I do a little starter kit with a front open enclosure and under tank heater, thermostat, food dish, water dish, calcium multivitamin, a couple of hides, and a humid hide. That way I know that those geckos are going home with everything they need. And I actually offer a discount whenever they bundle a gecko and a kit with us. That way it's just a little more encouragement for them to get the starter kit with me. And that way it's just peace of mind for me. You know what I mean? And when they do that, when I sell them like that with a discount, I don't hardly make any profit on the tank at that point, but it's peace of mind that they're going home with the right stuff, Yeah,
they got the right stuff and a healthy animal, and then you to be there for support.
Exactly.
Right. So when it comes to, there's so many ways to get information out to people. There's obviously the website route, if you have a website, social media, things like the podcast, YouTube channel, things like that. What have you guys seen to be the best way to get information out to people, and the most accessible way? Because I think that's another thing. They want it to be accessible and get that information. And then through those ways, like, what have you gotten the best feedback with in terms of people actually accepting that information and you having positive experiences with
Honestly, these podcasts, man. I get more messages about these podcasts like, hey, man, heard you on Evan's podcast. Love the information. I just got one of those the other day. I think I sent it to y'all. Just like giving us a shout out and saying, hey, thanks for all the info. And I responded, hey, we're about to do another one. Stay tuned, Yep. But honestly, these podcasts are the best source to be able to send people to, because there's so much different information that we're able to lay out with all the different breeders that are on these between this podcast and some of the other ones, some of the ones in the past, that we're able to really have a good resource for people. And there's still going to be some conflicting information there, but that's everywhere. That's with anything,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just have common sense and, use your best judgment on what you think or want to do, or who you may, trust more, do more research. It's not really us versus them or anything like that. But, I do think that the podcast is definitely a top way, because then people don't have to read it or really watch it. They can just put it on and do what they were doing. I with the videos, I do try to watch, especially if someone's going to show something, but I get a lot of stuff done while I'm listening to these podcasts.
Yeah. No, that's the best thing about them, is like people would just go in the reptile room. Everybody's got a clean gecko, so they just put it on while they're cleaning geckos, and just something they have in the background where they're still absorbing that information and getting that information. And then also like access to the guests. You guys could go and ask follow-up questions like, hey, like Heidi mentioned this, like how can I get more information on that? Or like, how does she specifically do that? Which is also super awesome.
Yeah,
to get that interaction.
It's cool to see like everyone's personal insights, and then a little bit more in depth about the breeders and stuff like that. Kind of getting to know them more. I mean, a lot of them we kind of already know each other, but when you have that on there, it's like, oh, cool. Like I didn't even know that about them, or just hearing their point of views about stuff where they're actually speaking and getting it out there. Because a lot of us are friends on Facebook, but we don't always see each other's posts, or some of us don't even follow each other for different views or this or that, but it's still cool to be able to have that and know that about one another, and to have the different opinions and views and things like that to go off of it. And sometimes it's even stuff like, oh, I didn't even think of that. I'm going to try that.
Yeah, it's also super hard because I think social media is really one-sided. Like people go on social media a lot of the times for those arguments. When we have a podcast, we're like talking with each other. If there's something that I'm like, Heidi, the way you use calcium is stupid and blah, 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 blah. But obviously I wouldn't say that. You are great with supplementation, but we're having a dialogue about it. It's not one-sided, and we're talking about that information, because as you said before, there's so many ways to do things nowadays, and it's not as one-sided as I think a social media post could be. And even just messaging someone, like, people don't even answer their messages anymore if someone doesn't agree.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what are you doing?
Well, and even
you can't get anywhere with people.
We probably all, I mean, we all supplement, but we probably all do it differently, use different things, you know, stuff like that. But the main point is they need their supplements, you know. These are different ways you can do it. This is how we do it. It doesn't mean you have to do it like we do. It's just something we each do, and what's been successful for us. Even incubation we've talked about, we all use a different medium.
Yeah. So when it comes to people who are looking to get their first gecko, or even getting into breeding, there's so many different ways to breed nowadays. What do you recommend, or for you guys, you could talk about your personal experiences, but just trying different things out, seeing what works and what didn't work. What was the best way for you guys to experiment? Obviously in a safe way, because the health and care of the geckos come first, but also just find your niche and find out what works best for you guys.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
For you guys experimenting and finding out different ways to treat your collection, to care for geckos, and then also to breed, what was the best way that you found to experiment with things, but also just taking care of the geckos and making sure that they're taken care of?
I mean, just trial and error, really. It's just a matter of doing what doing all the research that you can, like we were talking about with these podcasts and all the archives of like Gecko Nation Radio, like we mentioned earlier, and taking in all the information you can and then processing it yourself and coming up with your own way. Everybody does things differently, just like Heidi just said. And it's just a matter of testing your own way out and making sure that it's just as good as the other ways. As long as it's the same end result, then that's all that matters. For example, I'm one of the few breeders that breeds, in fairly medium numbers that I know of that doesn't use the osteoform vionate mixture. I've always just used reptile. It's what I've always used since I first had reptiles, and it's never done me wrong. And so I've just stuck with it. I buy it in bulk now, but it's the same stuff that I've always used since I was 15 years old. So there's little things again, like Heidi said, the different incubation medium. It's a lot of what you just start out with, really, for me, because I started out using the clay medium for incubation, and then after learning more from other people, they're like, oh no, well, I've never used that, I use this, but this has always worked for me, and it still does, and it's reusable. I boil it and bake it, and it takes a little bit of time, but it's less overhead that I have because I'm not ever buying any of that again. So it's just trial and error, really. Everything's going to work differently for different people, and it's just a matter of figuring out what works for you in your collection and in your home and your climate and your region. There's so many different factors that nothing is cut and dry, plug and play, black and white,
Yeah. Before we go on, I want to say thank you to our sponsors. Impeccable Gecko is a small to mid-sized family-operated hobbyist breeder operation. They specialize in leopard geckos with high-quality genetics. Their goal is to provide customers with the absolute best animals that they could produce, coupled with honest and transparent business methods. At Impeccable Gecko, integrity and animal welfare are above all else. Impeccable Gecko is a strong supporter of the Strength in Leos podcast, so follow them on social media and check out what they have available. John of Gecko Boa started early, like most of us, catching lizards and snakes in his backyard at any chance he got. Over the years, he has kept and bred more than 80 species of reptiles. In recent years, his focus has turned to specializing within the genus Eublepharus. He has worked hard to pioneer some of the most cutting-edge leopard geckos while maintaining genetic purity and honesty. He also keeps the most diverse collection of pure Eublepharus species in the world. He has coordinated with biologists around the world and has contributed DNA sampling and distribution range info to help sort out the cladistic relationships within the genus. Check out geckoboa.com for more info and available geckos. Suburban Geckos is operated by Chris Charlton. Chris's passion and enjoyment for herpetoculture, and more specifically, leopard geckos, drove the desire to take his hobby to the next level. With experience in breeding and raising reptiles well over 20 years, Chris is dedicated to producing quality animals for both the hobbyist and breeder alike. Suburban Geckos treats each animal with the utmost care and respect, and cuts no corners when it comes to health and integrity of their geckos. What started off as just a couple aquariums has grown into quite the collection in just a few years, and they wouldn't have it any other way. The dedication to their animals is unparalleled and evident in the quality and health of their animals that they produce. Exemplary customer service is another area where they excel. They're readily available to answer any questions you may have regarding their animals, husbandry, and etc. For more info and to see their availability, check out suburbangeckos.com. Blizzy-billed Leos, while new to the scene, is taking strides in following the footsteps of top-tier breeders and keepers in care and ethics while aspiring to bring fresh looks and crosses to explore latent potential. Prior to becoming a breeder, Greg of Blizzy-billed Leos completed hours of extensive research on lines, ethics, morphs, and how certain traits interact with others in order to begin projects which are coming to fruition already in the second season of breeding. With a major focus on line breeding the correct way and customer service done right, Blizzy-billed Leos aspires to be a breath of fresh air to the customers and keepers they encounter. Be sure to check out their Instagram, Blizzy-billed Leos, and stay up to date on project development, availability, or just tips on having healthy animals in your care. Dab Exotics is a hobbyist breeding operation that was started in 2017. They specialize in producing healthy leopard geckos from top quality genetics. Dab Exotics is an awesome supporter of the Strength in Leos podcast, so follow them on social media and check out what they have available for sale. Shane Kelly is a blue-collar, working-class guy that has a reptile breeding business with his wife and kids. They are currently working with high-quality ball python morphs, western hognose snakes, and select leopard geckos with a focus on bold stripes, and they're looking forward to adding Albie Snow and Ghost this year. They have been listening to the podcast since the beginning and are proud to be a Season 4 sponsor. Go check out their social media, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and also check out their morph market to see what they have available. So I know there's also things like, say, let's take Enigma, for example. I think we could all agree here that Enigma shouldn't be bred. They have that neurological issue that's connected to the morph. For people who are like, okay, well, let's try this out. Like I've heard from other people's experiences, but I want to try this out and breed Enigmas. Like, how would you guys take that response?
Well, there's certain things that, maybe are super new to the hobby and haven't been tried out at all. And then there's plenty of other things like Enigma and Lemon Frost and some of these other things that have been tried over and over again and they've tried to clean up the genetics, and it's been proven that it just isn't going to happen. And decades and decades of, in some cases, decades of trying to outcross, in some cases, just a few generations. But in any case, when you see a dead end, it's a dead end. That doesn't, nothing's going to change that. Just the fact that you haven't seen it in your own collection doesn't mean that if you have enough reputable breeders saying, hey, this doesn't work, then that's generally a good idea. Just stay away from it,
Yeah,
I definitely agree. Yeah. Heidi, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and in the groups that I run, we have, featured posts in pretty much all of them, that touch on the Enigma and the Lemon Frost and, the issues with them and things like that, just so it's already out there. And a lot of times people like new to the group will comment on it like, oh, like I never heard of it. Like, what is the issue? Or, even though it is kind of laid out, they still want like something new because that was probably posted like a couple years ago. And, a lot of us will just come on there and we'll just say like, it's been a fairly common occurrence with either of them that this or that goes on. So it's best to just stay clear. And even if there's one or two breeders out there that work with them claiming they don't have issues in their lines, they don't have the tumors, they don't have the syndrome, whatever, there's far more claims of them acquiring them with the issues than kind of taking the side of the one or two breeders that are, claiming there's no issues or this or that. It doesn't help them justify their case whatsoever. So I think, that's kind of where a lot of the disagreements happen, because some people are going to do it anyway. But we've said our piece, we gave them the info, it's do what you want to do, but just so you know. And then it comes down to, if you do go that route, you're not really going to be welcome to share all that in the group. And then, or what happens is they end up doing it and then like, well, I had these babies and, now they're doing this and rolling around, can't eat. And it's like, we told you, and it's, we still will help them because it is what it is, but it's like, we told you this, and it's like, so now you're going to probably have to get a smaller enclosure. You're probably going to have to tongue feed it, keep the lights lower, and I mean, that's with the Enigma syndrome. But then with the stuff with tumors and stuff, they usually end up taking them in and they get them euthanized, or their tumors have, crushed their organs inside because, like, oh, well, you can't see them. It's like, well, they're internal too, so. But, folks want to do what they want to do, and there's a few breeders that work with both and, cross them to everything else in the world to try to find a cure, but.
Right. Yeah. And it's so hard because sometimes with social media and all that stuff, you get more attention on that stuff than actually just moving on and all the evidence that goes against it, which I think is also hard because then people are just fighting and just showing evidence to evidence kind of thing, but you're putting so much attention on the thing that's wrong. And there's so many other like great morphs we have out there and things that you could do right with things. But so people are so focused on the negative that you can't even get to the positive aspects of the hobby.
Well, and their defense is primarily how the gecko looks. Like mixing Enigma with stuff looks great. Sure. A lemon frost has a very unique look. The eyes are crazy cool. It's not worth it. And I feel like the people working with them and wanting to purchase them, they don't care about the actual well-being of the animal. It looks cool. Who cares how it acts? It's a reptile. Like, it's in a tank. Nobody cares. It is what it is. Or
right.
Having that abnormality, or look at, or there's people with YouTube videos and, TikTok videos with their geckos swirling and rolling around because they have something wrong with them, and it's a huge joke. Or look how cute he is. He can't even catch his food. Like that, it's something that people find entertaining. And, maybe some of us take it too seriously, but it kind of is. Like, it's still a living thing, and we're trying to, move away from, the negativity our community ends up getting sometimes because of, neglect or carelessness and, but it happens. All we can do is try to keep preaching the same things over and over again and hope those breeders, realize and stop, or, eventually just go away. I feel it's declined for sure. I don't find that many people asking these days about lemon frost and Enigma. I know it's still out there. Maybe it's just not in my groups or whatever, but if it is, I usually get shown it because I'm in a few breeder chats, and they'll bring it up occasionally. But I try to not follow anyone. I don't stalk anybody working with that anymore. I try to keep it out of my mind, keep things a little more positive these days.
Yeah, right. But it's also so hard when you're someone who loves, we all love these animals, right? We do anything for these animals. We work our butts off to make sure that care is, tip top. We're getting those fresh waters in there, good food, cleaning, all that good stuff. And you have people who don't care at all about the rights of this animal and the neglect of this animal. So I think one battle that I always find myself in is, where am I going too far and letting this really impact how I view the hobby and all the negativity? And how much do I just like turn an eye to it and just not pay attention to it? So like, I don't know, Seth, if you want to talk about first, like, how do you navigate being positive and then putting your eye to that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I feel like our society as a whole kind of thrives on negativity and on drama, and so the whole saying of "there's no such thing as bad publicity" is really true in the long, in the grand scheme of things. If you look at some of the people that have done nothing but the wrong, or a lot of the wrong things coming into the hobby, that still have a huge following on whatever platform that they choose to be on, it's proof in the pudding that there is no such thing as bad publicity. That just getting your name out there will still get you enough following to do, certain things in the hobby. But I mean, just as a whole, I try to stay positive by just focusing on my own collection, and just I've dealt with a few, very few haters that, kind of tried to get my head here and there. And it's hard sometimes because we're very passionate about what we do, and we're very passionate about our animals and our collections and our projects. So it's really difficult to just ignore that stuff sometimes, that noise, that background noise sometimes that ends up coming into play. But I think it's really important to do so and to focus on your own collection and your own projects and your own direction. And that's what I try to do here, is just really focus on our own stuff and not really worry about what everybody else is doing and saying. And that's helped me a lot in this past year, of drowning out that negativity and just kind of staying on pace here in this room, you know?
I think venting.
That's awesome.
Yes, we just vent
each other and our stuff and stuff of a select people, but I think that's definitely helpful. Because ironically, with as hot as cancel culture is, the most unethical people get the most attention, and it's like, but yeah, it's everywhere in the group, and I can say the same thing and be as helpful and friendly as possible, and it's genuine, and still, I'll get personally attacked in one way or another. It's like, okay, like I'm literally just trying to help. Like, I don't have these groups for some godly power trip. Like, I really want to help. I want the right information out there. I want people to be decent to each other, and anyone in any of my groups can see there's hardly any drama at all, because I am very selective on who's in there, and you get one warning, if that, if you're going to be rude to someone, because it's not necessary. Help or don't help, but it's like there's no need like for the name calling and harassing someone or arguing back and forth. Like, give your experience, your opinion, and move on. Like, it's not serious.
Or the passive aggressive belittling of people. That shit is unacceptable too. There's no reason for that. Now, and I'll tell customers all the time when I'm messaging back and forth, look, I'm sorry, I'm short and sweet, I'm blunt. Please don't take my messages as anything other than just me trying to get the information out there as quickly as possible to you. And that goes back to me wanting to do those TikTok videos, because I feel like sometimes I'm in such a hurry with everything that I have going on that when I have somebody that needs my advice on anything, sometimes I'm a little bit short and blunt about stuff, and I always hope that it comes across correctly and positively, but sometimes it doesn't. So that's why I feel like that'll be a good resource for me to be able to just like, hey, go check out this video.
Yeah. Well, and I get that too. Like, I'll get messages, and to keep my response time up, and to be proper and things, I try to get to people. But sometimes I'll be like, I'm in the middle of something, can I hit you back up later? And I'll get you those pictures, not a problem, but just give me a little time. And usually they're fine with that, but I don't like obviously having them unread or however they might feel. But like, I actually was sharing with one of the other breeder chats I'm in, and we were sharing pictures of different morph market emails we've gotten, where people ask a question, and if you don't respond within 20 minutes, they like have all this like negativity to say about you and call me name and whatever. And I showed one of mine that like I only have a few, but one of them was someone trying to correct my labeling. They didn't read it correctly, and I'm like, nope, it's what I said it is, and I even gave a little explanation. And then nothing. And then like a month later, messaged me again, offering half of what the asking price is. I'm like, I'll pass. And he's like, well, you can't pass. I'm interested in buying. I'm like, I can actually.
That's hilarious.
Like, you can't pass.
Like, I'm interested in buying it. This is what I'm willing to pay you. It's like, that's not how it works. I mean, there's pages dedicated to that sort of thing. Like, how ridiculous some people are. Like, I don't mind, throw out a reasonable offer or making a bundle deal or something like that, but don't be rude to me, offer me half the asking price, and then tell me I don't really have a choice. But
yeah, I think people are just so entitled to their opinion, to what they think in the hobby, and they just think their way is always the right way, and there's just such a lack of humility to just say like, hey, maybe I'm wrong. And I'm totally cool with it. If someone comes to me and gives me a reasonable argument that like I should not be supplementing my leopard geckos, then I'm going to hear them out. And if I don't think it's right and I come to my own conclusions, then that's cool. But I feel like people today, they're just so like, my way is the right way, and you can't go against that. And that just entitlement is just broadening the hobby in so many ways.
Yeah, and that goes for both sides, because I've even seen breeders posting in groups that, how annoyed they might be, or how they don't have time to respond to every single question or take pictures or this. So it's like, well, I mean, I get to an extent some things can be very repetitive, or what some people want every single detail and they want it right now, but
Also part of
I kind of feel like we're obligated to provide that for them. Like,
yeah.
Right.
customer
Especially on some of these, if I'm paying, a higher price for this animal, like I want to get that information. I want to see those pictures and make sure it's up to date.
Oh yeah, and I personally am highly selective of what I bring into my collection and who it's from. And a lot of it is, their overall responses and, obviously their reputation and this and that. But I have a lot of breeder friends, but I'm not buying geckos from them. And it's not really anything against them. It's just, I'm just very picky that way. But if I am going to bring something new in, I want this and this information before we move forward. It doesn't need to be right then and there, but so I respectfully can give that to someone who's asking. They're about to make a purchase from me from something I produced. I feel like, they are owed that. If it's, it's not something ridiculous, usually it's like, oh, pictures of the parents, or if it's a proven gecko, they want to see pictures of the offspring. Sure. Like, I wouldn't want that.
Right. Yeah. And it's not unreasonable to ask when you're buying these things. So,
and I'll even be like, yeah, like, I have this bold stripe or whatever, and these are the parents, and here are the grandparents. Grandparents are probably from Seth or something like, so I'll include that too. And then like, oh yeah, I know them, So that's always fun for them to hear, oh yeah, I know who they are. So, it's not a big deal, but some people, like I said, whether they're customers or breeders, like some people I think just get caught up in that negativity where they want to complain about stuff or it's just too much. And
generally people don't mind waiting if you just have to get back to them, because like for example, I just had an expo this past weekend and I sold a pair of het bell, or it was a female bell, white and yellow, and a male het bell from my bell extreme bold cross that I did. And I told them at the expo that if they contacted me, that I would be able to get them lineage pics and everything and give them, a lot of more background, because it was, a fairly affordable pair that they bought, but has a lot of potential to produce them some fire, So he messaged me today, and I kind of tweaked my back yesterday morning, so I'm a bit behind in catching up this week from being gone all weekend. So when he messaged me today, I said, hey, yeah, I'll definitely get that to you as soon as I can, but give me a few days. I'm trying to catch up. I've got some stuff going on. I just got back from the expo, yesterday. So, give me some time. And he had no problem at all. Absolutely. Thanks. Please just whenever you get a chance. So, as long as you just communicate with people, that's the thing, is a lot of people just ignore messages, and that's not what people are looking for. They want to at least be acknowledged, like, especially if they've already spent money with you. I always started off with, hey, thanks for your consideration and support, like, try to be professional with everything you put out there, because it matters with how people receive you. If you start off something with just like, oh, hey, here, that comes across a lot different than being real professional and starting the message off with the proper, words. I don't know. That's just me, I guess.
no,
yeah. Do you guys think that in the hobby there's been a lack of professionalism from people and getting into breeding?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
It's totally different, and it's really changing and really changing the scope of how people perceive that. Because if they see that from someone and they're like, oh, is like everybody like this? Is everybody experiencing kind of this terrible experience?
That's how we end up. We all get pulled together. When one of us does something, it kind of represents the rest of us, or looks like it is. And it's one of those things, like if you see the same breeder constantly complaining, it's like it's probably time for them to tap out, because your heart ain't in it anymore for sure. So it's like if you can't be bothered to answer a question or show a photo, like you have too much going on, or you just don't give a shit anymore.
Well, I think that probably goes back to producing just to produce.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you're passionate about projects and people ask about them, you're eager to get that information out there because you're proud of it, and you're
for sure
done from the ground, from the ground start of that project. And I know personally, I'm eager to pass along that information because I'm proud of what I've done there.
Especially if you're putting time into those projects. Like, you guys are at the point where you guys have projects that have been years in the making and are coming into fruition and are starting to create awesome stuff that you guys are putting out there. And you want that information about that project to be out there. You want that information for people to get interested into that project. And if you're turning people off to that, why would they buy from you and invest in that project that you guys are passionate about either?
Exactly.
Yeah. What has been the weirdest request someone has asked it from you from a gecko? It could be anything about pictures or anything, but what has been like the weirdest request you guys have gotten?
Okay. I got this one. Okay. I had a lady like 2 years ago I might have told you about this, Heidi, paid me for a gecko. And then like the very next day or maybe even later that night said, oh, hey, I changed my mind. Or for whatever reason, she couldn't buy it and asked for a refund. And it was such a quick time, short time frame. I was like, all right, whatever, here, full refund. Then like a few days later, she messaged me and says, hey, I got this worked out. I want to buy that gecko. Paid me again. And then like a day or two later, had some reason that she couldn't and asked for the refund again. And I went ahead and refunded again. Okay. Out of, against my better judgment. Now, here recently, like a few months ago, she contacted me. Y'all, this lady, I went back and forth with her. She paid me for a gecko and then changed her mind and wanted to upgrade to a different gecko, which I was okay with. If you want to send me some more money and upgrade to another gecko, I'll honor that and move on with that initial gecko. And then she decided that she couldn't get her house warm enough in the winter because she lives up in Rhode Island or something. And I guess it's an old house. So she asked if she could be refunded. And I think I refunded her some of it. And then she decided that she wanted one of my boys' gargoyles. Y'all, I've made like 8 different transactions with this woman between her sending me money and me sending her money back. And then finally at the end of it all, here recently, I don't know, I might have had total of like $175 of hers, like, just like in limbo basically, because I was still waiting to know what she wanted to do. And she messaged me back and she was like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and get this. And at that point, I'm like, I don't even want to sell her a gecko because I don't want to send something over there because she's so indecisive and doesn't know what she wants to do that as soon as she gets it, she's going to be like, oh, I don't think I want this anymore. So I was like, you know what? I'm sending you this much refund. We're finished. Have a good day. Thank you for your consideration. Like,
That's crazy.
I don't know what else to do there. It's just, I don't know. So that was probably my most interesting customer that I've dealt with over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think about that one.
I think I told you initially, probably when it first started a few years ago. I don't know if I updated you on most recent events with it. It's crazy.
Heidi, you can't top that?
I mean, I can't top that. I've got a few little things. Like, I mean, I've had one person ask, what's my most expensive gecko or nicest gecko? And they wanted it. I'm like, and I showed pictures or whatever, and they wanted it as a pet. They just wanted something that they thought, if I apparently thought it was the nicest, then that's what they had to have.
And they bought it?
I've had someone ask me, because their male wasn't interested in breeding, so how to go about artificial insemination. So we
be out there.
I did probably leave that unanswered for a few hours.
Wow.
But I kind of just...
That's a new one.
Ideally, I mean, I said, first you need to make sure she's ovulating, which he didn't check for. But I said, if anything, you might just need a new male. I'm like, we don't really do that with leopard geckos. Not that I know of. Otherwise, and then one time I shipped a gecko to a gentleman's club. The owner has him in her office.
Oh my gosh.
Show, and he, yeah. But
Wow.
other than those few things, nothing else really stands out. But the oddest thing was probably about artificial insemination. And I'm like, yeah, we don't do that. And if it is being done, I don't know anything about that.
That's crazy. Just when you think you've heard it all or like seen it all in the hobby, there's always those weird outliers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had one person ask, for baby, they asked for 6 baby geckos specifically, because apparently they had a roach problem and thought the geckos they're gonna set the geckos loose and have them take care of the roach problem.
You know what? People actually,
which was interesting
with those Mediterranean house geckos, people actually buy those in bulk and like release them in their attic.
Interesting.
If you're in
that's crazy.
If you're in a warm enough climate, especially like Florida and South Texas, they'll live you all year in your attic.
Yeah.
And
that's interesting.
A lot of some roaches and spiders.
Yeah, and they'll eat them, and they'll probably even breed by themselves.
Oh, I'm sure.
Without you having to do anything.
I've got wild ones around here, all in my garage and everything. Just running wild.
Do they ever try to get your feeder bins?
Oh yeah, I found some inside a cricket tub, full and like can't even move. Oh yeah. Yeah, whenever I do find it's very seldom, but when I do find them in a cricket bin or a roach bin, they're just completely bloated. It's funny.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy how like even with different reptiles now, like if you get them, I've left like geckos in a. I don't know if you've ever like put a gecko in a worm bin for whatever reason, just let them hang out there while you're putting them there. But did that once, and that gecko was huge. I think it gained like 2 grams after me leaving in there for like it was like 30 minutes or something. But yeah, especially with feeder prices going up and stuff like that. I know people were having issues getting feeders and stuff like that to their place, but Seth obviously doesn't have that problem. I know Heidi, you breed your own stuff too. So
yeah, the only thing I usually do is I order superworms or mealworms on occasion, and every other shipment doesn't go well, but it kind of is what it is at this point.
I've actually been buying more crickets lately just because I've been just kind of struggling with getting them raised from hatchlings to adults in the right, enough numbers for how many fat tails I'm working with these days. So I'm still breeding them in small numbers, but I'm ordering most of my consumption on crickets and dubia roaches and mealworms. Though I produce most of what I use.
Got it. Okay, interesting.
1,000 worms every maybe month or two just to kind of help boost, the worm colony. But overall, it's I guess probably 60 to 75% self-produced.
Got it. Nice. Well, Heidi, I definitely wanted to ask you about just your group, how you think your group is going on Facebook. If people haven't joined your group, I don't know what they're doing, because it's definitely, especially now, one of the best groups out there, just because so many groups are getting shut down. So how do you feel like your group in general has been going in terms of just people, positivity, growth within your group and stuff like that?
I feel like my main group, which is the Leopard Gecko Club, has been pretty consistent as far as having the same amount of members, because I'm usually denying or removing more members than I'm accepting half the time. So it always hovers around like 30K, I believe. That group specifically has some of the best people, like members and things, because a lot of them have been in there for forever, or know how to talk and treat one another. They know what they're talking about, or they're familiar with the rules. A lot of the time, people will comment something, and myself or one of my other mods will reply to them, and they'll be like, oh, well, whatever, because there's so many group, I didn't know which group, or the rules are all different in every group, or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I'm in a ton of groups myself, but I tend to not comment in many other groups, or I will recheck, even when I'm sharing like my own stuff from my Gecko page or whatever, I recheck the rules, because some groups don't want you to, advertise yourself, or they don't want certain wording or whatever, especially when it comes to sales and stuff. So I feel like it's kind of your own responsibility to check that before saying something or posting something. So that group has been great pretty much consistently. And then over the last several months, I've acquired a few new groups. Some by me just saying, like, you know, maybe get some additional admins or archive the group because it gets overrun with scammers or like it's just full of negativity. So sometimes they'll shut it down, and sometimes I'll get a notification that I was asked to be admin, and I will accept it, clean out as much as I can, and sometimes I keep the group, or sometimes I've archived them if they're not necessarily very busy groups other than scams. So I've taken over like Leopard Gecko enthusiasts, and now the geckos are us. I've got 2 bold stripe groups, and a couple Wisconsin specific reptile groups, and that's pretty much what it's been. It's just not really me posting every single day, but just keeping it clean, keeping it, you know, friendly and updated. And like the scammers are probably the worst thing happening right now. Is they'll get, and they have all these pages. Usually it's like 5 different profiles trying to share the same page, or one word is spelt different, and you know it's all Black Knight stuff or Tangerine stuff, and a lot of them belong to my friends, and it's like, and no one was cleaning that up. So I clean it up, I ban them. I mean, they're just going to make more, but at least now I turned all the groups private too. All of the groups I took over were all public groups, so anyone can just post or join or whatever. So it's cut down a little bit. There's still a ton of other groups out there that, you know, I don't really post on. I've tried contacting the admins or reporting a few things, and if they're unresponsive, then I usually just leave that group because it's just full of that sort of thing. But overall, the groups that I have are going pretty well. It just, like I mentioned earlier, kind of sucks when someone asks something, you try to help them, and it goes the way opposite way you were hoping it would go. Like there's no respect or appreciation for the time we're putting in, whether as admins or breeders or other keepers trying to be helpful. And I am hardly ever rude to anybody. So I don't really know where the hatred comes from, or I'll get a personal message, or it's like, are you serious? Like over me telling you that's not a good idea? So, you know. Overall, I do.
It's definitely something I've noticed is like just the Facebook groups of quality has just gone down so much. It's so crazy how bad some of these groups are.
Well, and then kind of with being a breeder, that lumps all the groups together. Like, oh, Facebook groups are, you know, so full of drama and not updated or bad influence. And it's like, but my groups aren't like that. Like, at least I don't want them to be, and I try to keep them from getting to that point. Like, I don't want to have some garbage group where people say whatever they want to say to each other and scam people and, you know, breed enigmas to lemon frost and things like that. Like, I want it to be, you know, somewhere for reliable information, or where they can share their geckos without getting torn apart.
Yeah, and there's only so much that you yourself and then also just your group can do in the hobby, because if there's these other groups that are promoting this information, this incorrect information, you can't really do anything other than if you want to go ahead and comment yourself about what these people are doing. There's not really much other than that you could do, because people are just letting this false information get out there, and it's getting a lot of attention because of if it's attracting drama or just if people don't know genuinely and they're getting into it.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to get people to focus.
I'm one of the main ones trying to keep up on it. I mean, I have, you know, some moderators and stuff that help. Sage primarily is my ride or die. She's been a moderator of mine since I first started a group, and she's always on there trying to be helpful. She's never mean to anybody. And, you know, her and I vent to each other because someone will get way out of line with their responses to us, or go message one of us personally and completely try to trash talk us, or they'll go on our profiles and talk crap about something a post we had, or which mine is private, so it's mainly just profile pictures I've had, and they'll go back and say your ugly ass dogs, and it's what? You're really that petty?
That's crazy.
People are ridiculous.
Wow. Yeah, that's way too far on so many levels.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what's also annoying. People just can't even keep it about the geckos anymore. It's like they're trying to do all this other stuff to get into it, and it's like we're in it for the geckos, right? Like it's awesome that we're able to do all this awesome stuff with the geckos, but it all goes back to the passion that we have about the geckos. And at one point, it just doesn't get fun anymore. Like you forget like why you get into it, and I feel like that's super important. And somehow the negativity gets into that. It's like you forget why you're excited about the geckos and how you got into it in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, and I haven't lost that passion for breeding, but on occasion I will think like maybe it's time I give up the admin gig because it's. I mean, I feel like I have helped people, or at least my groups have. But then on the other hand, especially if it's been a bad day, and it's like really like there is no appreciation for what I've been trying to do for the entire community, and that's not even just me trying to like praise myself. Like I am on there all the time. Like it'll be like going on 2 a.m, and my husband will roll over like, "Are you still like responding to whoever?" And it's like, well, yeah, like they
I don't
have
know
a
how
problem.
you good, Heidi.
I couldn't do it.
I don't know, and I'm not. I mean, I'm not. I don't want to say I'm not friendly in person, but I'm not really a people person. Like I don't like people in my house and things.
Heidi is a straight shooter. If you've never met Heidi, she will tell you how it is.
But like I love the expos and talking like the reptiles and things and helping in groups or whatever. But I really don't want people in my personal space. Like I don't post private things or personal things really on Facebook ever. It's about the geckos, my dogs, my mice, something I find amusing maybe, but I keep all that other stuff to myself because half of the people that you're friends with aren't going to approve of it. And instead of having that conflict, I just don't bother. It's not worth it. Like I have some people I would consider decent friends on Facebook or great breeders, but I know our views are 100% different.
Right. Yeah. And that's what it goes back. It's just about the geckos. Like,
yeah,
that's what it ended for.
Yeah.
It's just the geckos.
I try to keep it about. So if in a breeder chat or something, if it's going a certain direction, I'll just check out of that one and, go do something else.
Gets messy real quick with some of these people. Yeah. I know, Seth, you mentioned kind of the TikTok and how you have that great idea with TikTok and using that as just a library of resources. Where do you think, the future of information goes to with geckos? Like you see Facebook groups becoming, more watered down with less good information and more just drama. You see some things on social media where, not the right things are getting attention. So where do you think the future of getting information out there to the people are?
There's no telling, Evan. I'm sure somebody's going to come up with an app here soon enough that's going to cover everything.
Are you saying you got an app coming out, or
no? Definitely not. No, definitely not. I honestly don't know. I wish I did have the answer for that because I'd be on top of it. But I feel like we definitely need to re-examine how that information is getting out there because there's plenty of misinformation going. And so that's kind of where I evolved to this idea with TikTok of trying to have my own library of information to be able to send people to. But then, that's still just my following and my customers that are going to be consuming that information, so I don't know how to go viral. I'm too old for that stuff. All these new platforms and stuff. I'm barely keeping up with everything. I'm just trying to keep up with the cool kids, I guess,
You're already with the cool kids, Seth. President of the new Gecko Cool Kids Club. What about you, Heidi? Do you have any idea of, just more what Seth was talking about?
I mean, I agree. I mean, I'm trying to keep up with, for the most part with the trends or whatever. I have a YouTube, but I don't post on there much and I don't advertise it. If I take videos of my geckos, whether I'm talking or not, like I'll just add them on there so they're not on my phone. I don't post on TikTok. I think I only went live once on Instagram. I do a lot of reels and things, but just, trying to keep up with what people want to see, or I'm boring Seth, but I feel like it's just one of those things. Like, there's always going to be a different trend at the moment. Right now, it's just, trying to cancel people and be upset, look for a reason to cause drama. And at the end of the day, it's geckos. It should always be a fun conversation. Like, almost everything can be fixed with, a little bit of advice. Like, here, just change this up. And if people would just say that, there'd be a lot less drama. Like, try,
Agreed.
Make sure, oh yeah, do you have a thermostat? My things aren't reading, it's this one day, this the next day, just little things that they would just be polite. I see that on TikTok all the time. Like, oh, it costs 0 cents to be polite or be respectful. Like, it takes more effort to sit there and get so heated and type out all of this stuff than just either ignore it or be helpful. Because you're just as bad if you're not going to be helpful. Like, calling someone names and then, well, you should have known. It's like, okay, well, what do you know, smart guy? Like, usually they don't. They just want to fight.
Yeah. Heidi's over here dropping truth. Just going to play that on a loop. For everybody out there, just continue to replay. But it's so true. Like, if you're not being helpful, what are you doing here?
For real. Yeah, I have an entire rap album dropping in December about it.
What's the name of it so everybody can start streaming it?
Zeno's LP. I don't know.
Coming out on Spotify December 2022.
I'm always preaching the same shit, though. It's just, be nice, be helpful. Like, it's not a big deal. I mean, some things are. Like, don't breed Enigma and Lemon Frost. But other than that, like, it's really not that hard. Geckos are hardy,
That's true.
There's so much information out there.
Chill out, People get way too serious sometimes about all this stuff. At the end of the day, it's just geckos,
Yeah, and we'll get that. We'll get, like, a really frantic post. Like, oh my gosh, like, my gecko had, like, it'll be like a little bit of a cut on the tail, and you'll get 40 people within 5 minutes saying, vet ASAP. And it's like, no. Like, it'll be all right. Like, it'll heal by the next shed probably. Or, like, take a minute to actually read what they said and be like, and there was someone a month ago, their gecko had a little bit of a scab. It might have been, she doesn't know if it was bitten by one of the feeders or if it was possibly just from a bad shed or whatever. And everyone's telling her, run it to the vet. And it's like, it'll be fine. Let it dry out a little bit. And I'm like, you can clean it off with some warm water, put a little bit of the Neosporin on it. I'm like, it will dry up, and after a shed or two, it'll be gone. She actually just posted, like, today or yesterday, and it's completely healed. No vet needed. And it's like, I'm not opposed to taking your animals to the vet. Like, it may be necessary, but not for every little thing. And sometimes people aren't able to get them to a vet ASAP. Like, even trying to get my dog in, it's sometimes a month or two away unless it's an emergency. So there are things, especially like running this group the last 7 years, like, I've pretty much seen it all. So I'm like, we can just go back to these other things, or even people that did go to a vet for something, they share what they were told or what they did. We have a few vet techs in the group, things like that. And it's like, telling someone to run to the vet and then repeating that 500 times in a single post is not helpful. Like,
not all vets treated equally.
They'll say, like, if someone says it enough, like, obviously that's what you should do. And it's like, that's true to an extent, but sometimes I feel like they just don't know what else to say, so they're jumping on that train with repeating what's been said. It's just the herd mentality that goes on within all social media. It's like, oh, this is being said, I'm doing it too. And I'll be the one person that be like, nope, everything's fine. like, relax, you'll be all right.
Yeah, and that was a good point, Seth. Like, not all vets know what they're doing when it comes to exotic reptiles and stuff like that. And even when you're thinking about leopard geckos in the wild, like, if they're getting attacked by some animal out there, they're not going and rushing to the vet to get their tail fixed, or, if they have a little, scrape or something. Like, these geckos are out there in the wild and still surviving. And if you've ever seen a wild leopard gecko, they look all beat up, but they're still getting that same crazy lifespan, and they're still, healthy and eating right and all that good stuff. And I feel like sometimes people have that idea of mammal care and they're trying to approach the same way to reptiles, but it's completely different, and you can't really assume that, they're the same in any way.
Mm-hmm. And we see that a lot with the people that do rescues, is they try to compare that to, a cat or a dog with, special requirements and things. And it's like, this is a reptile. It's basic instincts. Like, it's not like it wants to live so bad. Look at me, look at me. Like, if there's a point, you have to say, like, what's best for the animal. Not, oh, I can help it, I can help it. And then post about it constantly, and it's not getting better. And they just can't let it go. And that's the selfish part. It's fine, you want to try. We've seen a lot of success with them coming back from the brink of death, but that's usually if they're just been neglected as far as malnourished. Some geckos, like, there's nothing left for them to give, and they've already given up. So it's like, it's in their best interest that that's what you do, and people hate to hear that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's the things that people don't want to hear is the stuff that needs to be told to people, especially when it comes to the health of the geckos and the health of the reptile, because that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with live animals, and you can't have a blanket statement for every leopard gecko that's out there. And it's really important that you get that advice from people like you guys who have been in this hobby for a long time and have experience and really just know what you're doing, and just be humble in that way to just accept that advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is super important.
Yeah, well, and it's really difficult too once you see the post, and then there's already comments of, oh, like, good for you for trying, and he wants to live, and like, they're saying all this stuff about praying for them, and it's like, look at it. Like, literally look at this gecko. Like, come on. And or even with, there's a few breeders, they hatch a baby with, deformities, missing limbs. It hasn't, whether it can move or not, or it's been like 2 months it hasn't eaten. It's like, you can't expect someone else to just buy that from you or take it off your hands and give it that nonstop care for it to live, tongue feeding it, helping it shed, that kind of thing. And it's like, that's where, our responsibility comes into play of whether or not something should be culled, which is what we've touched on before, is that is part of it. It's probably one of the worst parts of it, but it's part of being a breeder. And if you can't handle that, you should reconsider. With any luck, you won't run into that, but almost all of us have.
Yeah, from some point or another.
Mm-hmm.
And just imagine if your whole collection, both of you guys, if it was all special need geckos, like how much attention that would be.
Possible.
Like,
it would be completely impossible and unmanageable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what people are trying to do with rescues, and it's just not feasible in any way.
Yeah, you got to be realistic. You got to look at the bigger picture. A lot of it is selfishness, and they don't want to see it.
Now, with that said, I will tongue feed a baby that won't eat on its own, and eventually most of them will start eating on their own after a month or so of tongue feeding. And it's not tongue feeding every day; it's tongue feeding them like 3 times a week, just enough to keep them healthy, but not definitely not getting fat. And then the ones that won't start eating on their own, like I had one this year that would not. We would leave him off, leave him without food for several days, offer him food in his bowl. He just couldn't get it. He could not figure it out. But when you open the tub, he'd come flying out for, looking for a tongue fed. So I just gave him away. He was a beautiful white and yellow bell albino, should have and would have been a $300 plus gecko. I just gave him away at an expo to somebody and told them very clearly exactly what his deal was. He's going to be high maintenance. He's going to be special needs. He's going to have to be tongue fed throughout his life, as far as I can tell. But they didn't have to pay anything for him. So, it was, I feel like that's the right thing to do in that kind of situation, personally.
Yeah. And that's first generation stuff, already producing those bull stripes.
But yeah, I was gonna say, like what you were saying, is that I will start, tongue feeding babies, but if it comes to where they're not trying to thrive at all on their own, then it's time. Like, you can't try to keep forcing it. Like, if a month goes by, as long as they're starting to accept and they're drinking and shedding, like, they're good to go. But yeah, there's definitely a point where you have to say, like, okay, this isn't fair to the animal anymore. Things happen.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah, nice. Well, for you guys, just when it comes to positivity and just kind of wrapping it all together for people, like, how do you feel like practically they could go into the hobby with just a mindset of like being able to learn, wanting to learn, and accept that knowledge, and just continue to reap on that positivity and continue to have that ball rolling for other people?
Just never stop learning. Keep your mind open all the way, all at all times. If you're not learning, you're not moving forward, and if you're not moving forward, you're standing still. I constantly try to keep my mind open and accept new ways of doing things, or at least be open to hearing different methods of doing things, and make sure that it can't be a benefit to my methods. Sometimes it can, sometimes it's not. But if you're not even looking at things with your eyes wide open like that, then you're not going to be able to see them for what they are. So that's kind of the way I go about things.
Heidi, how about you?
Pretty much the same. Be open-minded, absorb it all. We've said over and over, there's so many ways to do things, or, acceptable ways to do things with the same end result. So when someone asks a question, like a lot of the time they'll even put in their post, oh, I get all this contradicting information. Is it this or this? I'm like, both or neither, or, whatever. Like, it's not always just that black and white. Like, you could do all these different things. And, like I said, a big thing lately is, thanks to the, advanced groups, is heat mats are outdated. Under tank heating is outdated. I'm like, no, it's like a very reasonable way to get what you need. They need that, belly heat. It doesn't need to come from underneath. You can get a deep heat projector or whatever, but again, that depends on your setup. Like, you can't have a 10-gallon tank with this big old heat projector going down on it. You would need like a really thin heat mat, but even then, like, nobody's suggesting you put it in a 10-gallon unless it has something wrong with it. But again, that's where it comes into, or like people saying the minimum, should be a 40-gallon and whatever, which is probably ideal, but not all geckos can handle that or even need that. There's a lot of really, like, I have, like, some of my fat tails, like, some of them are out all the time, and some of them, it seems like they never move. So, like, ones like that are more comfortable with less space, or would be. And if you have a gecko that's all over the place, go ahead and give them as much space as you can give them. Set up their tank how you want. But then you have people that put all sorts of knickknacks and crap in there, and it's like, that's for you, that's not for them. So, I mean, sure, it may be visually appealing, but it's like, that's not for them. Like, they can't hide under that bear or whatever the hell you have in there. Like, it's, But some things are cool ideas. Like, they'll take like like one of those funky shaped like candle holders or like a dish sponge holder, and they'll pack moss into that. And so it is cute and it's beneficial, usable for the gecko. Otherwise, it's all aesthetics that they want to look at when they look at their tank. Bios are beautiful to look at and beneficial. So, and that's what we say in our groups, is that it depends on what your ideal setup is, and then your.
And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with having the aesthetic stuff in there too, as long as all the needs are met.
Right. If it has everything that the gecko needs, sure, add what you want in there. It's your tank. Don't let add in there. And
I've had customers make Lego hides and like a whole little like Lego castle inside the tank, and I'm like, okay, that's gonna be hard to clean if he shits on it, but that's cool. Good idea.
Yeah, that's dope. So yeah, man, we need more people like you guys in the hobby. That's all I'm gonna say.
Well, that's what we're hopeful for with the newer generations that come in and that do kind of look up to us and like have consistently come to us for advice, is that they'll be the future of this, and people will come to them for that and keep moving forward. And I want to stay as involved as possible throughout my time doing this. I don't want to become like I've kept my my amount of geckos, my collection, fairly consistent because I don't plan on being that big old warehouse breeder that vanishes off of helping people and it's mainly just here's my website and never be actually involved or anything. Like I get, other people, they have their lives and whatever, which I have too, but this is part of it. This hobby is part of my life.
Unfortunately, there's a huge amount of turnover in this hobby and a lot of people that get in and get out, and the majority of that is because they get overwhelmed or they just lose interest or, whatever the case may be. They overproduce and just, like I said, just get overwhelmed.
Yeah. Well, it's a bad thing to have the in and out with certain people. Some, it really sucks to see them leave. And then others, it's like, oh, like you weren't doing the community any favors.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys for coming out of the podcast. If people don't know already, this is going to be a part 2 with Heidi and Seth. They're just so awesome. We can't contain them in one episode. So make sure to look out for that part 2. And again, guys, as always, I appreciate you guys just sharing your knowledge, just being awesome people, just awesome, genuine, great people, and for coming onto the podcast.
Yeah, anytime.
Definitely. We'll see you next time.
Yep.
Later.
And that's going to wrap us up for this episode of the podcast. I want to thank everybody for joining us for another episode, and I want to thank Heidi and Seth for joining me for another roundtable episode. As you guys know, at the end of each and every episode, I do my one big thing. For this episode, I really want to talk about the positivity that Seth and Heidi mentioned in the podcast. That's the biggest takeaway that I have from this podcast, is really how much they focused on just having positivity and focusing on the positive things that this hobby has to offer. I think sometimes we get so caught up in the negatives and some of the drama that happens with so many different people, and we don't focus on the good things that really got us into the hobby when there's so many other distractions that are keeping us away, and even sometimes not even making the hobby worthwhile or making it interesting and wanting to continue to be in the hobby and be a part of the amazing things that leopard geckos have to offer. It's really awesome to hear about Heidi and Seth, what they really do to stay positive and really focused on the great things that are happening when it comes to educating people about leopard geckos, about genetics, about care, and really just about creating the best leopard geckos that they could possibly offer to the world. So that's just one awesome thing that I really need to make sure that I'm keeping my mind on when it comes to just the podcast or just leopard geckos in general. There's so many different things and so many different people that are trying to take away from what we have to offer, and it really just doesn't do any of us any good. So that's my one big thing for this episode of the podcast. I want to thank everybody for joining us for this episode, and I hope you join us for the next one. Make sure to check it out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, and strengthenleos.com, wherever you listen to your podcast. This is your host, Evan Wooldridge. Continue growing in knowledge and share the strength in Leos.